The beginning of the Third Intifada has been predicted repeatedly in the past, but when the leader of Hamas called for a renewed uprising against Israel on Thursday, there was a sense that this time it could be for real. Ismail Haniyeh, leader of the Palestinian militant group that rules the Gaza Strip, was responding to President Trump's move to recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital and to eventually move the U.S. embassy there to Hamas. The decision amounted to a declaration of war, according to a Thursday speech by its leader. "Jerusalem is being kidnapped and ripped from us," Haniyeh said. Overnight, protesters in Gaza had chanted slogans such as "Jerusalem to us" and raised banners depicting Jerusalem as a red line. U.S. and Israeli flags as well as pictures of Trump were burned amid cheers from protesters. With the United States getting blamed for the escalation of tensions, fears mounted that another intifada could also directly target Americans. What is an intifada? Most commonly, the Arabic word is associated with two long Palestinian uprisings against Israel. The first one occurred between 1987 and 1993, followed by a more violent second uprising in the early 2000s that lasted for about 4 years. The uprisings are known as the First Intifada and the Second Intifada, and both proved destructive to the Palestinian economy. The word itself carries a lot of other meanings, however. Apart from uprising, it can be translated as shaking something off, or tremor. What was the difference between the first and second? Although the term intifada is often associated with violent protests, nonviolent actions such as boycotts initially dominated the first uprising, which lasted until the early 1990s. The outbreak of protests was the result of many factors that had accumulated for years, and it followed a collision between an Israeli military truck and several Palestinian cars. 4 Palestinians were killed in the accident, and subsequent protests fueled by rumors that the collision was deliberate were met with violence by the Israeli military. Protests, often carried out by young people, featured stone throwing and attempts to boycott Israeli products. Instead of deploying terrorist tactics, Palestinian protesters initially relied mostly on non-lethal actions but were still met by what Israel dubbed an iron fist policy. By January 1988, anti-government protests attracted tens of thousands of people in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. They rallied against a policy that Israel's defense minister at the time, Yitzhak Rabin, described as force, power, and beatings. Throughout that uprising and partially due to the harsh Israeli response, a number of militant political groups emerged or were strengthened, including Hamas. The Second Intifada began in 2000 as the result of a breakdown in peace negotiations between the Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization. The breakdown coincided with a visit by Ariel Sharon, then opposition leader and soon-to-be prime minister, to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, a complex that also houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque, considered the third holiest site by Muslims. Sharon's declaration that the Temple Mount is in our hands was understood as an attack on its status by many Palestinians and Muslims elsewhere, and it led to riots.